I was a single mother in my mid-40s, raising my 4-year-old son in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Life had not been easy, but I was doing my best to create a safe, stable home for him. We had recently moved into a modest house on 24th Avenue, nestled in an older neighborhood where families had lived for generations. Some houses were well kept, with neatly trimmed hedges and flower beds lining their porches, while others showed signs of wear, peeling paint, sagging porches, and broken fences that had long since lost their battle against time. It wasn't the worst part of Altoona, but it wasn't the best either. I had spent the past few weeks trying to turn the house into a home, arranging furniture, unpacking boxes, and making it feel warm and welcoming for my son. That night, he had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room, tucked under a thick blanket. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater kicking on, struggling to push warmth into the chilly winter air. Then, out of nowhere, there was a knock at the front door. It wasn't a frantic knock, nor was it particularly loud, but in the stillness of the night, it sounded like a gunshot. My heart jumped. It was late, too late for visitors. A creeping sense of unease settled over me as I approached the window. I hesitated before pulling the curtain aside, just enough to get a look. Standing outside, illuminated by the glow of the porch light, was a petite young woman. She wasn't dressed for the weather at all. Just a sleeveless top, her bare arms hugging herself tightly, as if she were trying to generate warmth. I cracked the door open just enough for the chain latch to catch. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She looked at me with wide eyes, her breath visible in the freezing night air. "I locked myself out of my house," she said. "Can I come in and use your phone?" Something about her didn't sit right. I wasn't sure if it was her appearance, the nervous energy she gave off, or the fact that she had stopped at my house, of all houses. "Where do you live?" I asked. She rattled off an address on 23rd Avenue, just around the corner from me. I knew the street. It wasn't far, maybe a 2-minute walk at most. But that was what made me pause. To get to my house, she would have had to pass at least a half-dozen homes, most of which had porch lights on. Not to mention the old Sheetz gas station on 25th Avenue, where there was still a working payphone outside. It would have been the most logical place for her to go. Instead, she had walked past all of those homes, past that payphone, and landed on my porch. A voice in the back of my mind whispered, "This doesn't feel right." I glanced behind me at my son, still asleep on the couch. My instinct screamed at me to be careful. "I'm sorry," I told her, "but I can't let you in. I can let you use my phone, though." I reached for my cell phone, but as I handed it through the cracked door, I felt a pang of guilt. She was shivering, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. Even if something felt off, I didn't want to be cruel. I grabbed an old coat from the hook by the door and offered it to her as well. She took both the coat and the phone, then stepped toward the far end of the porch, away from the door, where I couldn't hear her conversation. That was the moment my stomach dropped. I had assumed she would make a quick call, ask someone to come help her, and hand my phone back. But instead, she lowered her voice and turned her back to me, murmuring into the receiver. Every hair on my neck stood up. I didn't know what she was saying, but something told me I didn't want to find out. I forced my voice to remain calm. "Just leave the phone in the mailbox when you're done," I said, trying to sound casual. "And bring my coat back tomorrow." She gave a quick nod, still not facing me. I closed the door, locked it, and peered through the peephole. A minute later, she set my phone down in the mailbox and disappeared down the street. She never returned the coat. The phone calls. At first, I tried to brush it off as a strange but harmless encounter. Maybe she really had locked herself out. Maybe she had been embarrassed to ask a neighbor for help. But in the days that followed, I started getting odd phone calls. They came at all hours, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the dead of night. When I answered, there would be silence on the other end. Other times I'd hear breathing, and once a man's voice said, "Who is this?" before hanging up abruptly. It happened so frequently that I stopped answering altogether. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My gut told me that the strange woman on my porch had something to do with it, but I had no way to prove it. Then, a couple of months later, my suspicion was confirmed. The newspaper. It was a cold morning when I stopped by the Sheets on Broad Avenue to grab coffee. As I waited in line, I glanced at the local newspaper sitting on the rack near the register. And there she was, the same young woman who had stood on my porch that night. Her face was printed on the front page, along with the mugshots of 10 other people. The headline read, "Major Drug Bust in Altoona, 11 Arrested." I grabbed the paper with shaking hands and skimmed the article. The bust had taken place in Juniata, one of the rougher neighborhoods in town. The suspects had been involved in a large-scale drug operation, selling out of houses near 6th Avenue and 10th Street. I felt a cold chill run through me, but this time, it wasn't from the winter air. My mind raced back to that night, to the way she had passed by other homes, to how she had spoken in hushed tones on my phone, to the strange calls I had received afterward. Had she been casing houses? Had she been trying to lure me into some kind of trap? Or had she been looking for a safe place to hide? I'll never know for sure, but I do know that trusting my instincts that night may have saved me, and my son, from something